Good evening, everybody, and welcome to While the Chicken Soup is Cooking. We have a wonderful live studio audience over here in Zoom land, so do come along and join in the conversation. The best audience in town there is, quite frankly. Yeah, you can also watch live on Facebook and live on YouTube and catch up afterwards. But don't miss out on all of the fun. Come and join us now. It really is the best chat show in Bushy on a Thursday night at 8:45. You can't go wrong. Happy Hanukkah, everybody.
Happy Hanukkah to you.
Thank you very much indeed. How's it all been? 8 nights.
Lovely but different.
Lovely but different.
How many donuts have we all eaten collectively?
1.5.
Oh, you're very good.
Each day or?
No. The ones you gave us.
Oh.
Because that was lovely.
Yeah.
That really enjoyed
It's
it.
amazing what you did and worked out for a day in the end.
It was certainly a Hanukkah miracle.
And a very
Yes,
good group.
definitely.
But it was great.
We intended to come, but our car wouldn't start.
Oh,
no.
no! You should have called us. I'd have driven round.
No, didn't matter.
We managed to squeeze in a few extra people en route to the different places. If we heard of someone who was isolating or shielding or whatever it was, I tried to kind of swing by and catch them just for a couple of minutes or so. So it was very nice. And my mum actually sent me a really lovely article. Does anyone know what paper it was in? Did anyone see this article?
Which
We've already made it into the paper. We're already famous.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
So, Sarah, did you have anything to do with that?
I might do.
You might have done. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Good evening, Lee.
Good evening, how are you?
Happy Chanukah. Lovely to see you. And good evening, Mark, who's probably going to hide in the background over there. Oh no, he's waving. There we go. Fantastic.
I thought I joined the party.
Oh, lovely to see you. Happy Hanukkah to you.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, indeed. So we've had our Hanukkah miracle, getting that mobile menorah around all those places, and I think we managed to give out. I mean, we distributed 1,000 donuts. That was the order.
Did you not have any irony that you ran out of petrol?
We had enough petrol to last us for
8 nights.
for 1 hour, and it ended up lasting us for 8, which was perfect. But no, go on. We actually wanted to ask. Go on. You want to ask the question?
Well, we were thinking, because of the theme of Hanukkah, it's finishing off, we were going to pose a question of what of what miracles have happened to you in your lifetime that you would like to share with us. If you would like to share with us. Nick, do you want to start?
This year.
This year.
Who? You can't hear?
Miracles that happened.
Do you want to start, Nick? You can
I mean, I do. It does. It just so happens I have a miracle story. It's not good if my mum's listening, but but I don't necessarily have to go first if anyone else wants to dive in.
A miracle.
A miracle. All right, I'll go with my miracle story first then. It was when I was in university. I was living in Manchester, and it would have been my second year, I think, of university, and I was driving a brand new car that was merely 6 weeks old, and it was the day after Rosh Hashanah. So it was the fast of Gedalia, and I was asked to play football after the fast finished. I was in Manchester University, and I was playing football in the Power League, JJB, whatever it was called up there, which, if you know the area, is next to the Trafford Centre. Give us a hands up if you know the Trafford Centre in Manchester. Okay, so it's the fast has gone out. Probably shouldn't have been playing anyway. We were playing 10 o'clock at night, driving back around 11:15 or so. Hi, Emma. Driving back around 11:15. I had a full car, and we're driving along the motorway, and we're coming up to the junction that takes you. This is all fascinating, right? Coming up to the junction which comes off to Bolton. Oh, yeah. I know it. Yeah. And there was a traffic cone. I was in the right lane. There was a traffic cone lying flat between the two lanes, and I swerved to avoid it. And the rest of the story, we don't really. No one in the car really remembers what happens next. All we know is that we lost control of the car, and we ended up on the. I say we I lost control of the car, and we went careening off onto the embankment on the side of the road, and it was very, very scary. And as I said, no, I don't know exactly what happened. I have a few recollections. Yeah, I recall feeling a cold breeze. I recall the sound of crunching glass, but I don't actually can't remember if any of the windows smashed. And I don't know if you've ever seen the first Men in Black film, but there's a scene in the Men in Black film when Tommy Lee Jones turns to Will Smith and said, "Remember that red button I told you not to push? Push the red button." He presses the red button, and there's this scene as they're going speeding through a tunnel, and they turn upside down, and his head's just like bobbing along upside down like that. I have that recollection going through my mind from that night, and it turns out, upon analysis of the car afterwards, that we must have flipped, but we landed the right way up, and when on subsequent occasions I drove past the place where I came off the road, I noticed that it's the only place along that stretch of motorway between the Trafford Centre and Whitefield where I was living. It was the only place which did not have either a brick wall or a bridge or a fence or a gate or anything like that. It was a grass embankment that we came off. And not only that, but if we'd have come off a foot or so earlier, we'd have just gone straight into a tree. And if we'd have gone half a metre forward, we would have continued going down a steep hill into another road. So it was miraculous.
And no one got hurt.
No one got hurt.
That was a miracle in and of itself.
In fact, a year or two later, I was talking to one of the boys who was in the car, and we were reflecting on what had happened. And he said, to this day, I still thought that someone had shouted "coat," not "cone," and so they had thought that I had swerved to avoid a coat. And so there we go. There's my miracle story. And then afterwards, I went to see a rabbi who said, well, first of all, you're lucky to be alive, but second of all, there's a concept that after something like that happens to you, that you should give charity to the equivalent value of chai, which means life, which has the numerical value in Hebrew of 18.
18.
Right, very good. So the following morning, I went to Daven Shacharit, and I looked in my wallet, and I didn't have £18. I did have £1.79. And when the guy with the tzedakah box was coming round, he pointed at the floor and said, "Is that your penny?" Oh, £1.80. Absolutely unbelievable. So there we go. That was my little miracle. So now, does anyone else have one? Pardon me, Lawrence?
Would it not have been more of a miracle if you hadn't crashed the car in the first place?
I think my mum would probably agree with you.
I think we all have stories when we come close to, because the dividing line between being well and not well, you cannot measure. It's so thin. Sarah and I were going up to a levaya in Liverpool, and on the radio we heard that the M6 was blocked. So I decided to go up to junction 23 on the M1 and then cut across the A50 up to Manchester that way, which was fine. And we're travelling along in the centre lane, and well, speeding, probably 55, 60, and suddenly I see in the middle of the road a huge lump of metal. Not a cone, but real metal. And I had fractions of seconds. So I looked to my left, looked to the right, no way of putting across. If I pulled out into the fast lane, I would have got hit by the car coming up behind me. If I pulled over to the slow lane, I would slam into the car in the slow lane. So I had no choice. I had to stay in the middle lane, and I hit this piece of metal, which ripped out my gearbox. It took the gearbox completely away. Sorry.
I thought you said earbox.
No,
Gearbox.
Gearbox.
And we're doing 50, 55 miles an hour with no gearbox.
Oh my gosh.
And so I didn't panic. You know, I didn't throw stone out of the car. I didn't panic. And I found a gap, and I sort of pulled into the onto the hard shoulder, and there was a line of cars on the hard shoulder. And what had happened was there was a scrap metal lorry which had been going up the motorway and had dropped off stuff from the back of the truck, and all of us had hit the debris. So I lost my gearbox. Other people had lost tires. Other people had lost windscreens. Nobody was hurt. The truck actually pulled in, and somebody took his number, and then he drove off. He just disappeared. And then we were stuck on the sideway waiting for the AA to come and tow us home. And that was hard, because that's another miracle, because the AA bloke got there just in time to pick us up and take us to the nearest motorway station, which we needed desperately. It wouldn't have been so bad for me, but Stella, it was a problem for. So it's my pleasure to share it.
So the millions watching on YouTube, we apologise, Stella.
So we didn't get to the Lavoya, and he drove us. In fact, the relay drove us back home. And we thought, well, you know what, we're at Watford, maybe we'll take a train up to Liverpool, because by this time we worked out we could probably get to the Shiver. But in the end, we said, if something doesn't want us to get up to Liverpool, so we just came back home. But we're lucky. You're just lucky. You know, it is a miracle. Yes, I'll stop talking now, dear. She's tapping me to say stop talking. I will.
Who paid for the damage?
Because we had a police report, the insurance paid for the damage, and we didn't lose our no claims bonus because it was a reportable accident.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Actually, reminds me of
we were lucky.
a couple of months ago. We were driving down Marsh Lane on the way to school, and we were 5 meters away from a motorcyclist. He sped past us on the right-hand side as a car was turning right off the beginning. We were right at the beginning of Marsh Lane, just after Stanmore Broadway, and she was starting to pull out into a right turn. The motorcyclist went straight into the front of the car and fell off his bike. The kids saw it on the way to school. They were like very shaken, and I think everyone was okay. I submitted a report to the police. You'll be pleased to know. But it's scary when it's like right in front of you, but something happens on the road. It's very frightening.
There was a report in the paper today of a chap who had a motorbike stolen from his drive, and he jumped in his car to chase the people who had stolen the motorbike. And I think he was doing so somewhat aggressively, and he ended up knocking them off of the bike, and one of the chaps died. And today he's gone to jail for 10 years.
Oh, that's terrible.
Very good.
Yes. That is terrible.
That was down here, or that was?
I don't know. I can't remember. It was. I will try and tell you for later on in the evening. I will look it up.
No problem. So do we have more miracles?
I've got a bit of an act of God story that's not a negative one, but it's quite sweet. A close friend, and it's not my own, it's someone else's, but I've always thought it was sweet. A close friend of mine who lives in Washington, she married quite late for a girl. She was in those probably early 30s then. And everyone was saying she was never going to get married. Her grandma kept trying to make shidduch, etc. And then unfortunately her grandma passed away. And I remember her phoning me during the shidduch and saying, "I'm never married now. My grandma's not here. Who's going to do it?" And her grandma had this most amazing, those old model cases, those old square makeup box things that people had. She had this amazing Dior one. And my friend said, "Can I have grandma's Dior box?" So they said yes. And she's about to fly to Paris to do her dissertation. She was doing a PhD in French cinema. And she pops the box on the floor, she gets her ticket, and the person says, "Oh, you look a bit of a rush, do you want to be upgraded?" She said, "If you've got one, that's fine." So she got upgraded to business class. The box is there, and this bloke, beautifully dressed, falls over her grandma's box. Literally falls over, hurts himself, pretends not to because she's a girl, etc. But he falls over her grandma's box. And then he gets his ticket, and he was going on business and work. It's something, I think it's foreign trading then or something like that. He's not in that anymore. And he falls over the box, and he sits next to her on the plane, and they end up married. So it's a bit of a hand of God story. It's not really a miracle story, but it's a really nice hand of God. Her grandma did make that shidduch, and she always says that was grandma's shidduch. I'm married because of grandma's box. So yeah, that's not a miracle, but it could be.
It's a miracle in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've actually just remembered a long time ago, on my son's Brit, my father, my late father, wrote his name and the date in our Siddur. And some years later, that Siddur just disappeared. Now I teach a lot at home, and I teach Hebrew at home, and I thought maybe one of my pupils had picked it up by mistake. And I wrote in Shul magazine, I did all sorts of things to try and find it, didn't find it. Years later, the caretaker, I worked at the synagogue, and the caretaker came into me. He said, "Can you read this?" He said, "I've just found it laying under somewhere." And it was my Siddur with my father's handwriting in. I mean, that was almost like a little miracle.
It all counts. It all counts. Let's have more. Let's have more. Little miracles. Doesn't have to be driving off a motor. By the way, one of the bits that I left out of the story, when I was 19, my rabbi taught me that it says in the Gemara that if you have a particular type of dream, that it is connected to the concept of death. And the week before Rosh Hashanah of the year when I had the accident, I had that kind of dream. So I'd woken up in quite of a fright, and I called my rabbi. I said, I don't know what I should do. I've had this dream. You taught me that it's associated with death. So he said, "Don't worry about it. Give some charity, fast on Erev Rosh Hashanah for half a day, and then just don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it." So I did that. I fasted on Erev Rosh Hashanah. I prayed my heart out for 2 days over Rosh Hashanah, and then this accident happened the very next night. It was quite frightening. But yeah, that's the spooky part as well.
Okay.
Go on, Stuart.
I'll give a miracle, but not to me personally, but to one of my sons. Many years ago, I was working up in town, and I had a call from my wife to say that James, that's my younger son, had been coming out of JFS, and that was when it was in Camden Town, crossing the road to catch the bus and being knocked down by a lorry. I had no idea how he was. Could I get to the Royal Free Hospital as quickly as possible? We had no idea. This was a call from one of his teachers just to say, "Being knocked down, don't know how he is, you need to get to the hospital quickly." I asked one of my colleagues straight away to take me in his car to the Royal Free. I can't tell you how much praying I did between leaving the office and getting to the Royal Free and rushing into A&E as I was there. And I asked where my son was. They said he was in a cubicle, he's being seen to. And the miracle was that he was badly bruised and cut up, nothing broken, nothing. And he said to me, don't worry. I said, what happened, James? He said, I was busy chatting to my friend. I just didn't look and I stepped out into the road. And to me, that was a miracle because I was hit by a lorry. He was in hospital for a few days because he was suffering bad bruising and shock. But to me, that's an absolute miracle. And I thank God every day for that.
100%. Wow.
I mean, every day in JFS was a miracle when we were in Camden. So Sophie will be able to testify to that as well.
Certainly nothing like the new JFS.
No, the spaceship, as we called it back in 2003. Does he still remember it? Does he still talk about it?
He doesn't want to talk about him. It was nothing at the time.
And just what she
and we certainly couldn't tell my in-laws at all, and that we spent hours in hospital and waited for them to be examined and whatever. We managed to keep it from my in-laws for at least a week because they were such warriors. You didn't tell your elderly parents in those days what was going on, and you shielded them. Not like our kids; they tell you everything these days. They want to share their worries with you.
Well, glad he's okay. That's the.
Yeah.
Got a couple of minutes left, guys. Gary, you just switched on over there. You got a miracle for us? Oh, he's switched off.
That's the miracle.
Good evening, everybody. Hanukkah Sameach. Rabbi, if you know one of the miracles that we're told when we go to visit Poland about the couples, how they meet.
Go on, help me out.
Okay, well, I only know the basic facts, but we were introduced to a young man. I think he was the showcase for the community, and he'd been brought up not knowing he was Jewish. I think he had tattoos, and it was, I believe, anti-Semitic. And he met a young woman who was also like-minded with him, anti-Semitic, and they fell in love. And one of them had a grandmother who was very close to the young couple. And on her deathbed, she told her grandchild, I don't know if it was the boy or the girl, that we've been hiding since the war and we're actually Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And she said this to a young couple, to the young person that was getting married. Somebody else that was also anti-Semitic, and he or she didn't know what to do, whether to tell the other person, to keep quiet, decided to confess and tell the other person. And it turned out that the other person had a similar story.
Gosh.
They were both Jewish. They didn't know it. And then they became frum, and they started, I believe, to leave the community. To lead the community.
And we heard this story when we were in Poland? I don't remember this.
I heard it when I was in Poland. I thought maybe they said it to every group.
Oh, see, I don't remember this one.
But to me, that's a miracle, that they should meet up like that, and they should find out and not go through the whole of their lives not knowing they were Jewish and being able to do something about it.
Yeah. Fascinating.
I'd actually like to know a lot more about the realities of what was going on during the Hanukkah story.
The realities of what was going on in the Hanukkah story.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of the small Jewish army going up against the Greeks.
Well, who they were actually fighting? Which Greeks were they? Were they fighting Hellenistic Jews?
That was a big part of it. That was a big part of it. But you've come to the wrong place, Gary. This isn't the place for serious learning. This is the place for.
My stories.
Oh, Mark.
Not me. Much better than me. I'll pass that over to.
Oh.
Yay!
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So I've got a story. It's not something that happened to me. It's actually something that happened to someone quite famous, well, relatively famous, Sarah Brown, who is Gordon Brown's wife. Remember him? He's the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So if you remember, when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, she had a baby prematurely, and the baby survived a few days and very sadly passed away when it was a few days old. Jennifer, the baby was called. So she set up a foundation in Jennifer's name in Scotland to research into premature babies, neonatal health, that kind of thing. The organisation went from strength to strength and did loads of good research, employed lots of scientists, did loads of stuff on maternal health, all of that kind of stuff. 17 years later, her one of her other children had a baby prematurely in Scotland, and the baby, it was very touch and go for a while, but the baby survived, the daughter survived, and the doctor that treated her told Sarah's daughter that the only reason they had the knowledge to save the granddaughter was based purely on the Jennifer Foundation and the things that the research that had been done by the foundation set up by Sarah Brown.
Wow.
Wow.
I just think that's such an amazing story, because obviously if you lose a child, nothing makes it okay, but how amazing is it that all those years later her granddaughter was saved because of all the work and everything that was put in by. That's it.
That's amazing. What a way to start off your first chicken soup session. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's amazing. Well, if we don't have any more stories, it's 9:15, and we'll call it a night for that. I mean, you're welcome to carry on schmoozing here, but we'll end the recording. Anyone who's watching off Zoom is welcome to join the after party. But let's just take a quick opportunity to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy the rest of Hanukkah, and we'll see you all again next time on While the Chicken Soup is Cooking.